Hello and welcome back to another session with us here on Facebook and YouTube. Every 2 weeks we're joining everyone to go through the facilities management and utilities management just to help you optimize your property investor journey. Today's theme, we're talking about cost-effective property maintenance tips. So for me, the starting point is always around budget. And I really do encourage people to start making sure that they're setting aside budget from the start of their property journey. Don't go all in your full buying costs, transfer costs, all of that, and then not have any budget set aside for any maintenance. Even on new builds, there's little bits and pieces that need to be done. You need to be doing some kind of maintenance to make sure you're keeping the property in its best condition. And never mind maintenance, you want to continue to stack the improvement on your property. This is an asset and you want to make it an appreciating asset instead of a depreciating asset where you allow it to rot. So the starting point is budget, and what we normally recommend to people is if it's a rental property, you're setting aside at least 10% of the monthly rental income, you're putting it into a separate savings account and you're putting that in place so as if there is any emergency maintenance, you've got access to that. Then at the same time, you need to start looking at planning towards any big ticket items that need to be done. So do a property inspection, understand what are the big items that are going to come up for capital expense. So be it a case of your roof needs to be replaced in about 7 years' time, you know about that and you can start setting aside a specific budget towards that sort of thing. The good thing about that is that moves you away from this reactive maintenance strategy and moves you to a planned maintenance strategy. So when you're setting aside a budget, you're not reacting and getting whatever is available at that time. You've set the budget aside, you save towards the right material for the right job, and you then spend accordingly. So the budget is a starting point. Then I mentioned the idea of a property inspection. So I do recommend that you do a major property inspection when you first get into the property. So that can be done by a professional property inspector, or if you have the experience, there's nothing wrong with you doing that full property inspection, making sure that you're checking all the needs as far as maintenance. You do a bit of a plan scheduled for your maintenance on the property, and you lay that out for the journey of the ownership of the property. Then there's another type of inspection that you should be doing regularly. So that would just be a general inspection. Walk through the property. As a minimum, walk through the property every 6 months. If you can, try and do that every 3 months, where you visit the tenant, you're obviously requesting access to the property, give them enough notice because it's got to be convenient for them as well. You're not trying to catch them out. You actually want them to put their best foot forward, and you're then looking at the property. You're going through that, you're doing the inspection. There's two things with this. Obviously, when your tenant's involved in this process, they're aware that you actually care about the property and you care about them as your customer, because that's what tenants are. And then you're walking through the property and you're having a look at the high level stuff. You don't need to go too deeply. So you're looking to make sure there's no leaks. So specifically roof leaks, pipes leaking, geysers leaking, taps leaking, that sort of thing. And when it also comes to roof leaks, that sort of thing, you're looking for damp damage as well. So at a glance, you're having a look, is there any indication of damp damage? If you're doing these inspections regularly, then you're going to see, listen, that wall is looking a little bit more discolored to what it was before, or the ceiling in that corner of the roof, or the corner of that room is starting to look a bit discolored. There must be a problem as far as some kind of damp damage. So that's the first look. You're looking at any cracks, so whether it be minor little hairline cracks, or if there's anything that you should be concerned about from a structural perspective, where there's more aggressive cracks. You're having a look at that. You're looking at the quality of your paint. Is it getting to the point where you need to do a new fresh coat of paint? The nice thing about doing these inspections often is if you walk through the inside of the building and you notice a lot of grubby handprints on the walls, handprints around or fingerprints and stains around light switches, that sort of thing, you can then instruct the tenant there and then to say, hey, listen, please, if you don't mind, can you wash this off? The nice thing about that is it means that it increases the longevity of the paintwork itself. So you're not waiting for it to really become grubby to the point where you have to repaint the room, you've got that opportunity to tell them to reduce or to clean and reduce the impact of putting their hands on the wall. Again, you're training your tenants to look after and to look after your property. So if you look after them, they're going to look after your property. Okay, then as you look at that, so that's a quick inspection of the insides of the property. The main things, as I said, is around leaks, around moisture ingress. If there's rooms that are closed quite often, you're making sure that there's no issues around circulation. And then obviously the state of the paint on the inside. Does it need to be cleaned? You can have a look at floors. Are there chipped tiles? If you've got tiled properties, I'm hoping that people don't have carpets in their rental properties, but you're just keeping an eye on that sort of thing. Likewise with cabinets, kitchen cupboards, bedroom built-in cupboards, that sort of thing. You're checking the hinges, handles are all there. You're checking to make sure tenants aren't hanging tiles over doors, because that's another way that woodwork or the cabinetry gets damaged because of wet tiles being hung on them. And you're catching that before it becomes a case of that's their habit, and it happens for what, 6 months, a year before you have to replace doors. You're checking the hinges, you're checking handles, that sort of thing. So that's the basic on the inside. Again, coming to the outside, the big thing and important element is your roof, making sure that the gutters are clear, there's no plants growing out of the gutters, there's no strange plants growing out of the roof in between tiles. You have a quick look, make sure all the tiles are sitting the right way. You don't want to have tiles that are loose, that have been shifted, because that's going to mean that there's room for water to get under that. If your roof, you want to check that your roof is clean. A buildup of dirt on the roof is also a way that water can sort of wick up under the tiles. So you want to get rid of that dirt as often as possible. You don't want to have a buildup, and you don't want to have a huge expense of now having to have that whole roof high pressure washed. If it's kept clean consistently, that makes it a lot easier. And then the other big item for me is to look at your landscaping. So when it comes to the landscaping, making sure that there's no trees that are now coming too close to the buildings. There's no bigger trees that are growing too close to the building, growing too close to the boundary walls or fences, because that's something that if they get out of control, it's now going to damage foundations on the building, foundations on your walls. It's going to start growing through fences, and that's going to damage those elements of your property. So rather catch those before they get out of control, before the trees, bushes, shrubs get too big, and it's now a big job to have them cut out. And again, when it comes to landscaping, that's the first thing you see when you come into a property. You don't want to hand over an old tenant at the end of their lease and now be trying to quickly do the maintenance of your landscaping, to make your landscaping look a little bit more beautiful, to get that curb appeal, to try and find a new tenant. You want that to be consistent, rather slowly improving the garden over time. What I want to touch on is this idea of short-term price, so trying to save on price of items versus the long-term cost on items. And I really want you to think about that, and that's why that idea of budgeting is so important, because when you talk about short-term price savings, that's things like door handles, lock sets, that sort of thing. A lot of people are tempted to go with the cheapest product when it comes to that, and then what happens is in 6 months' time, because it's a cheap product, the metal isn't as thick or as strong, and that item ends up breaking down and you have to replace it. So what ends up happening is it lasts for 6 months, you replace it, now you've paid for the same thing twice, where you should have paid for the right product to start with. So spend a little bit more upfront on high quality items, not high fashion items, so not things that look nice and are sort of very, boutique. You want stuff that is hard wearing. When it comes to locks, you want good quality brands. So the Dormers, the SR Abloys, the Yales, those sort of things. Making sure you're not getting any of these cheaply manufactured products and installing them. You might save on price at the start, but it's going to cost you more long term. And I have the same opinion around paint. So when it comes to paint, think of high quality paints that are going to have a 7 year, if not 7 year to 10 year guarantee on the paint, which then means you don't have to recoat so often. It doesn't get damaged by the UV, doesn't get damaged from being washed, that sort of thing, where the color sort of powders off and washes out of the paint. Use better quality paints, and there's some nice cost-effective high quality paints out there if you go to your contractors hardware stores as opposed to just your normal hardware stores. So don't be tempted to save on short-term price at the expense of long-term cost. Remember, when it comes to property, it's here for generations. So don't try and cut corners up front. Think about the journey that this property is going to be on. You're going to have it for a long time. Make sure that you haven't saved on price up front. You're thinking the long-term cost. So biggest takeaway from here is make sure you budget, because when you budget, you're able to plan, and you're then saving on long-term cost as opposed to trying to cut pennies at the beginning. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll catch you at the next one.